This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We are internet friends turned real-life friends who both experienced the tragic loss of our sons to sudden infant death syndrome in winter of 2021.
In the year after Aiden died, my husband and I both became unemployed. My parents divorced, and we had to move 5 times for various reasons.
And as for me, just a few weeks before my son Quinn died, my then husband had come out to me as a transgender woman and we're subsequently divorcing.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
But as long as we're living, we will love our sons deeply and work to make sure that we live a life that makes them proud.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
I must say, you guys are pretty cute with your microphones and your headsets.
I know, and you give me such a hard time about my audio, but we look legit.
No, I only gave you a hard time about your audio at the beginning, not now.
We've made progress. We've made progress.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Alina, should I introduce my own mother?
Introduce your mother for us.
Okay. Well, today we have a special Mother's Day episode, and instead of talking about what it's like to be lost moms, we thought it would be fun to talk about what it's like being a lost mom's mom. So I want to introduce my lost mom's mom. This is my mom.
Hello.
Her name is Marlene. I guess, Alina, you can call her Marlene.
Hi, Marlene.
Hello, Alina. It's so nice to see you on chat.
Mommy, you know what's so funny? Remember when you thought she was a murderer?
No, I questioned if it was possible that because you were going to a small cabin in the woods with a stranger, which is exactly what I've told you your entire life not to do.
Thankfully, Alina is not a murderer, and we're all still here now. But okay, so I think Alina and I discussed a few questions that we want to ask, but I think it would be helpful for everyone if we could just give people the context of what our relationship looked like before last year.
Well, I'd like to describe Judith's personality from birth, really. Judith is almost always happy. She's bubbly. She's a joy to be around. When she was a child, 5, 6, 7, she was the Pied Piper, and all the babies would follow her in the park at our place of worship, at our synagogue. She was the organizer, and everybody loves Judith of all ages, and especially children. And that's how she was as an adult, an organizer, a leader, a happy person, a very, very happy person.
I would say that we get along really well and we're friends, but I'll also add that I moved out of the house at 18. And when I had moved home to LA for COVID, for Aiden to be born, that was the first time that we lived within a couple miles of each other as adults ever.
That's true.
I moved out and I went to college. So I would say like the context of Aiden's birth is that it was kind of an exciting time for our family because we thought that for the first time ever, like me and you and my husband and Daddy, we would all be together. Like it seemed like something that was idyllic because we never had that. You know, it was always like flying for holidays, flying for occasions.
That's right.
Like, this was the first time I could go over and borrow a plunger.
Right.
So
and it was such a hard time because of COVID. It was nice to have a friend.
It was nice to have a friend. It was nice to have family nearby.
We didn't really have a pod, my husband and I. We did not have a pod.
So we became kind of a pod. So I would say when Aiden was born, it was really the first time in a long time that it seemed easy to be a family.
Yes. You know, very easy.
I love hearing about Judith from your perspective.
I mean, when we travel together, like there are so many, we're like booking wrong flights, wrong days.
But it all works out.
It all works out. It always works out.
We have a few arguments.
Yeah, but you know what? When me and my mom are together with my husband, poor thing. It's just like double of me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I moved back to LA in November, and then Aiden died March 4th, and he had been born in December. So let's just say like the first few months of me living there were perfect. I mean, Aiden, we lived in your house for the first few months, and like the first few weeks, and
which was not the plan.
Which was not the plan, but we just needed extra help, and it was easy to have you guys around. And
and I took the early mornings.
And you took the early mornings, the 6 a.m. shift.
Right.
So it was working, and everything just kind of felt like almost like a TV show, right? Like it just kind of felt like a TV show.
Everybody had their roles, and we were all so happy with that beautiful little baby. We were all
so happy, and we all ate dinner together every night, and it was really nice. And so then Aiden died. And we don't have to talk about that day, but I guess Alina and I really want to know, like, from your perspective,
the only thing I would want to interject there is that you had just gone back to your apartment regularly.
Yeah, we had just moved out of the house, which I think is a blessing.
Me too.
Me too. So we just gone back to the apartment, and we were like getting into our own routine, and then Aiden died. And we immediately left that apartment. I didn't want to even sleep there that first night. And we moved back into your house. So what was it like for you to watch those first few days, or that first, let's say, month? Like, what was it like in those early days for you?
It was hard. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was horrible. You were crying. You were angry. We were all crying, but you especially were crying, and you were so angry and upset. And people, just like in your previous podcast, people didn't know what to do for you. And so they sent food. And I took the first week off, and that was good. I tried to drive you wherever you needed to go and keep you company and be there for you.
And also, you didn't trust me driving.
Oh, that was for sure. I remember you when I went back to work, like that first day you called me and you were driving somewhere, and I was freaking out because I could tell you were so in another world, and yet you were driving on the freeway, and it was terrible. It was hard not to walk out of work and go find you. For me, as bad as the days were, at least the days gave me purpose. But even worse, and what haunts me all the time, were the nights. The nights were horrible because you would come into our room at 2:00 in the morning or 1:00 in the morning. And I'm not at your house now, but even when I hear steps here, where I'm staying now, in the middle of the night, I wake up expecting you to be running into the room and sobbing. And
I was going to say, like, that first night.
Oh, that first night.
I came into your bed.
Yeah.
And I was just...
It was horrible. All three of us were crying and sobbing and hugging. But there were so many nights where you woke up and came to our bed, and it was just, it was hard. I guess just being woken up from a deep sleep for such anguish, and to hear your daughter cry like that, sobbing. I mean, it's hard enough during the day, but I think at night it was even worse. And then I pretty much kept everything in when we were all together during the day. But at night, you can't do that. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Everybody is so low. The nights are bad. I had never known grief like that before. When my parents and my in-law passed away, they had been suffering. There was not this shock. And I had seen people who had had shocks, but I had never experienced it like that. And you know how you always read about how the nights were worse. Well, we asked for some of the wrong medications. We should have asked for other medications. We should have asked for Ambien. We should have asked for something to make it so we were all sleeping.
Yeah. And what about, you had also lost Aiden.
So I have a very, very, very close friend, and he called every day, probably more than once. And he said, I can be there for you, Marlene. No one is there for you. I can be there for you. And he was. My husband went back to work. He works from home, but it was a very busy season for him. And the way he dealt with this during the day was to just close the door to his office and go to work. So I had a friend who was there for me, but it wasn't the same. As close as he is, he wasn't living it. So it wasn't quite the same. And I didn't want to tell him he knew everything that Judith was going through from his work. That's his work. And he would talk me through it, and I couldn't have done it without him.
Because you felt like you just didn't know what to do with me.
I didn't know what to do other than hug and cook and clean and open the door for all the people who were coming. I mean, so many things I did wrong.
We were going to ask you, not wrong, but we were going to ask you, like, what are some things that you feel you could have done better, and what are the things you did that you
I could have stopped people from coming, as many as came. I could have said, okay, that's plenty of time. You know, I could have said, hey, Judith, really, it's too much for her, more than 10 minutes. Because you were already grieving and exhausted and in another world, and to have all these other people was worse. It made it worse.
Pre-loss, she would have had it under control and taken care of it on
100%,
her own.
100%, 100%. And then the other mistake I made, which I didn't really realize until I listened to this podcast, was that I tried to talk about regular things.
Yeah, I remember that distinctly.
Yeah, and
I remember so many meals, like, after, where you guys would just try and talk about normal things.
Right. We shouldn't have all eaten together. I could have done that differently.
Just because, well, let's just explain that for people who maybe are going through it now. From where I was sitting, it felt like people were just trying to, like, move forward and pretend it wasn't happening. And felt like I was screaming in pain, and everyone was just trying to pretend like it wasn't happening. And I think sometimes acknowledging it and just saying, like, this is so painful for you right now. We don't have to talk. We could just sit here quietly.
Right. That's what I would have said. We absolutely were not trying to ignore it, but we just didn't know how to deal with it. We didn't know how to do it.
Because it made you uncomfortable, or because you just didn't know what to say, or you didn't know how to make it better?
Because sitting in silence is hard.
Yeah. Sitting
in silence with 4 people at a table is terrible. And your husband tried so hard to make conversation so there wasn't silence. You know, he was trying to do what I was trying to do, and that was a mistake. I should have listened to your silence, and it would have been okay. I think that's one thing of advice I would give to a parent, is just let everyone be silent. And if you just have to eat in 2 minutes and cry the whole time, then that is what needs to happen.
Yeah. What about having us live in the house with you? I mean, did you ever wish that?
Never, not once.
Even though, like, you needed space too?
Never, not once.
You wanted us in the house?
I wanted you in the house.
I have a question about, one of the things my sister said to me when we had gone to a therapy session, and she was like, I just thought, like, when I first saw you after Aiden died, you were gone, like, on the inside, like there was nothing behind your eyes. Is that something that you felt too? And did you think,
yes,
did you worry that I would never come back? Like,
of course. But my friend kept saying, it'll be okay. She'll come back. She'll be different, but you will have her again. But it's really hard to see at that point. It's really hard to believe that that's going to happen.
Could you talk for a minute about what changes have you seen in Judith? I mean, some I'm sure are hard, bad. Some are maybe positive. I'm wondering if you could talk about that. I would love to hear.
She's sad. Judith, who is never sad, never. That the only time I'd seen her, she got angry. There were times where she was angry, like once a work thing didn't work out at all, and they really were nasty to her. And I happened to, unfortunately, be in the car with her when she got that email. That was a bummer. But so mad, sad there, but that was nothing like this. That was nothing like this. And so it was hard to wonder if that personality would come through again. And even 6 months later, when we went on a trip, there was some bad moments, some very, very bad moments. And it's hard to see your child crying on the floor. And it wasn't until I listened to this podcast, Judith had me read something that the floor is a safe place. And I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. How would I know? Even my friend who was my counselor, my therapist at the time, that friend, he didn't even tell me about the floor. So,
because you're saying you'd come in and I'd be on the floor and you didn't know what to do or think.
Right. Oh, that friend of mine, he said, I can do anything. Just tell me what I can do. And I said, find a therapist. That's what I need. I need Judith to have a therapist. And he found her therapist. He did. He found her. And the therapist gave Judith directions to give me. And that was what to say every day, what to do every day, what to do. And then it was easier.
Do you remember what the advice was? What did I tell you to say to me?
Well, I have it in my phone still. Actually, I wrote it down, but then I forgot to look at it, and then I stopped doing it. And then she had to remind me, and she got upset. Tell you I'm here for you. I will do anything you want from me, that you need me to do, that I love you, that I'm here for you, that
that you care.
And that I care. That was the one I kept forgetting to say, because I just feel like I didn't need to say it. I think it's just so, of course, yes. And I care.
And what would you say, how would you say I've changed for the better?
For the better.
By the way, we've talked about this on the podcast. We talk to each other all the time. There are these gifts that come with loss. We would turn them in a heartbeat.
Right.
Right.
We're talking about the positives. These are consolation prizes.
I think that she has a deeper meaning of life. That when you experience death, and when you experience so many other people who have experienced death of a child, that you become deeper. You're a deeper person. There is more there. It's not just happy.
Like on some ways, that's harder because I'm sad more often. But the other side is that you have more depth of emotion for all capacities.
Yeah. Yes. You have capacity now to give to your daughter. You have capacity to give to me when I'm old, or to Daddy when he's old. You have capacity to not to be so short, so like patient. You have more patience. That's the word I'm looking for. You have much more patience. Much more patience.
Much more patience. I think that is true. I think I do have more.
And you have found a way to find your Zen, even if it's for a short period of time. Because you didn't have any Zen before this happened. There was no Zen. I have no Zen. And Judith also has no Zen. We don't.
I don't have any Zen, but I found it. Like I'm better at just sitting still and doing nothing.
The baby, Aiden, died in March, and we went to the beach during the summer, and Judith would sit on the beach. You were just breathing, and you weren't thinking about it. You were meditating. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Wow. Meditating, Judith. Those there's an oxymoron there.
I think that's true.
That's true, right? It's true.
I think there's another thing I like in our family structure. I think that for a long time I played a role in the middle of everything.
That is true.
And then when Aiden died, I had to step back from everyone and everything.
And it was very hard for the rest of us to step into the middle.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in some ways, some ways people have stepped up, and then I think there are just some things that just like don't happen or wouldn't happen or don't, they just don't get done because I can't do them and no one else takes them on. And there are just things that like I never stepped back into doing.
I agree. When Aiden died, one thing that I have learned from your podcast and from Aiden dying is how important it is to talk about Aiden, to speak about him all the time. All the time we speak about him, not every day, but certainly regularly. And it's nice that Judith has pictures of him around the house. And it's nice that he has, I came home from work one day and there were pictures of Aiden all over the house.
Yeah.
And
I put them on the fridge.
Everywhere. Yeah. It was good. It was good. I've learned, because Aiden died, I've learned how to speak to people who have had a loss, as opposed to I'm so sorry, or, what people say. You've heard them all. You know them. I don't have to remind you of them. But now I'm much more aware of my speech when I'm around people who have lost parents or friends or anybody.
What about like the things that we do to remember him, like the birthday parties and when we plan the thing at his grave?
I really like that. I really like that. I messed up this year on his anniversary of his passing.
You didn't mess up.
I didn't mess up. I made it for me, I made it for a time, and I organized people to pray for him at a certain day. And I asked for them was to take a picture so I could show Judith. It wasn't the day that Judith wanted. It was a day that I chose, that I needed. And I was so excited that people seriously from all over the world were doing for him. And I started sending it to them, but it wasn't the right day.
I think that's a perfect example of like the fact that you're a grandmother grieving your grandchild, and you have needs too. Like you also are grieving, and you put us and our grief first so often. And like sometimes I think I forget that other people are grieving too.
I would say that that's probably true in this case. You were not happy with me.
I was not happy with you.
You were at AT&T getting a new phone, and I was sending you WhatsApp pictures of people in
Japan,
other countries praying.
Right. It was definitely difficult to get at the AT&T store. It was difficult to
and I should have, my intent was to keep hold of them all and put them in like a, I don't know, something online and then give it to you. But I dropped that ball and didn't do it.
Let me ask another question, which is, I think a lot of the family dynamics changed also after Aiden died, certainly with my sister and I. How was that for you?
That was horrible. That I hadn't thought of that. That was hard for me. It was really hard. It was hard. It was just really hard.
What do you mean? Can you explain further?
One of the most wonderful things in our family was the relationship between the three of you, especially between sisters, and that was damaged. It was hard. It was hard for the two of you. It was hard as a mother to see it. Yeah. And you kept saying you take her side. She would say she took your side. I would say I'm trying not to take anybody's side, but nobody believed me. And my son was going through his own stuff. And I was so afraid that he wouldn't graduate for COVID, because he had COVID, and then online was really hard for him. And then Aiden died, and it was just, wow, I hope he can please finish May. Just finish. Just finish.
Yeah. It was kind of like everything fell apart.
Yeah. But Ilana, she did, I thought she did as best as she could. I really do feel that she did.
Taking her side now.
You see, there you go.
See, this is the thing that happens though. It's really hard because it's nobody's fault. Like the circumstance is just so tragic that everybody's doing the best they can, and everybody's intentions are good. And
it is hard that that the best you can is not the best that you think they can. That's hard too.
And you really had, I can imagine for you, you had everyone having competing needs that are in conflict with one another.
100%.
Like I think about my brother's wedding, which was like horrific.
Horrible.
Horrific.
Horrible.
but like you had a son who was getting married and a daughter who
was having situational changes and
That's to put it mildly.
It's true. I mean, it was
like, how could you watch like one daughter on the floor throwing
crying.
cake and your son getting married? Like,
yeah.
Talk about competing needs.
Right.
Your son needs his family to be there and your daughter does not want to be there. I don't know how you balance that.
And it was a completely 100% legitimate excuse. You know, if it's one thing when a sibling says, "Oh, I don't like her, I'm not going to that," you know, because it's ridiculous. But this was a tragedy. This was absolutely, it was fun. It was understandable. Oh, you know what else I was going to say is that I'll tell you one thing that I learned listening to your podcast again is that Judith, I feel, was very angry about family members not meeting Aiden.
Yes.
And I feel that Judith absolutely 100% put COVID aside and that was not a good enough excuse. But then I heard Alina on the podcast talk about how her family did not meet Quinn.
No, they did meet Quinn. They quarantined for 2 weeks. Nice try.
That's a good try.
But my family only had to drive.
Right.
And I will say a lot of my family did not meet him. His aunts and uncle met him, but and again, they only had to drive, but the rest, you know, people extended did not get to meet him.
I guess I could say that some people met him, but others did not. Yeah. And I felt that you were, it was hard to get over that. Like you feel
it was unfair for me?
I do. I felt that your amount of anger towards that was unfair.
But you know, those family members.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm going to defend myself. Well, those family members are making efforts to meet the new baby.
Oh yeah, everybody is rushing to do
Everyone's
this.
Scared.
Right.
But you know what? To me, it just reinforces my feeling about it. I feel even more strongly that it matters. Now that I have pictures of all of the cousins together and I have pictures of the baby, it's like, it feels like such a gaping hole. And it feels like it's easier for those people, this is just my feeling, to not acknowledge his existence because now they have something so concrete that they are attached to. It's like the pictures or the video chats, like that's nothing. They got to hold her, but they didn't even get to meet him. Like I feel even more strongly about that, but I can understand that you're saying you feel it was unfair.
And I'll say that at least in our side of the family, that people have made a heroic effort to speak about Aiden and to say, oh, this baby looks just like Aiden's pic. Even if it's just the pictures, doesn't he look like him? And compare how she looks to his picture on the wall and things like that.
Yeah, we have made an effort. I think that that's something that's really important to me. And I feel like I go above and beyond to make sure that I talk about him to excess.
To
so other
even
people,
your niece and nephew speak about him. And what makes me happy is what Judith has taught us is that her niece and nephew who are small speak about him without any hesitation. Much more hesitation happens with adults than with kids.
That's right.
Judith, her niece broke her leg and Judith wrote on her cast and she included Aiden and it was nothing. It was as if it was so normal. It was so normal for her. And nobody thought twice about it.
Kids are not as weird about it.
Kids are not as weird about it.
So I have 2 questions I want to ask you.
Sure.
I would love to hear you share a memory of Judith as a mom to Aiden.
Well, my husband and I both commented about how natural it was. I think one of the hardest parts, and I think Judith would agree, was that she had, because everyone was taking care of them, she laid in that bed with that baby on her chest for many weeks.
Yeah.
And he was missing then and then. And she just fell into it very naturally. Not the mechanic stuff like what to do about this or why is he doing that? And he was just being a baby, right? He was just being a newborn, and all those things that were happening to him were normal. She really fell into those. She took those pictures much faster than I ever would have taken pictures, like formal pictures of her and her husband and the baby and Aiden. And I'm so glad she did. That we all cherish those pictures even more now. Like we took Aiden to the beach when he was, I don't know, how old was he?
He was 3 weeks.
3 weeks old. We took him to the beach and she was trying, it was a beautiful day. Winters at the beach are special on nice sunny
in California.
On sunny days. The air is perfect and the water is perfect and the sunshine is perfect. And Judith was facing the water and she couldn't keep the shade onto Aiden. And I said, honey, just turn around. And she didn't do it. And then she finally turned around. She went, oh, he's fine now. Things like that. Things like that just... that was a funny moment. We both laughed about that moment.
You know what? Let me tell a memory about my mom. So Aiden wasn't pooping because he was 4 to 6 weeks. He was in that stage. He wasn't pooping, and my mom, we didn't know what to do, and she was like, "Oh, I know what to do. We just need to give him some prune juice." But I guess we didn't have prune juice, so you took a prune and you mashed it up. Mixed it in water.
Right.
You made your own prune juice, and then we called my sister after, who's a pediatrician, and she was like, "You cannot do that." She was like, "Babies cannot have prune."
I didn't know that newborns couldn't have water. What the heck? What's that? She said, their little kidneys cannot handle it. I went, okay, well, we're not doing that again.
That's what I remember.
All right. And then my last question for you is I would love for you to share a memory of Aiden, because Judith talks about how special and sparkly he is. And I never got to meet him, but I would love to hear, from your perspective, what was so special about him.
Well, first of all, he loved music. I play a very loud and obnoxious instrument called the banjo, and I'm not that good at it. And yet he was quiet. And once maybe more than once, but once I was in a lesson and Judith needed 2 hands. So she put him on the floor on a blanket, looking up at me playing in my lesson, which was on Zoom because it was COVID. And he laid there and just listened. His eyes were wide open the whole time. Now, my husband leaves the house, but Aiden stayed right there and was it. And then there was a holiday that we went to that involves a lot of singing. And because it was COVID, it was outside and it was cold because the first one was at night, and she bundled them all up and put them in the stroller. And my husband said, he cannot interrupt this. It's like this chanting. He can't interrupt, Judith. You'll have to leave. He can't interrupt. That baby was awake the entire service and not a peep out of him.
Not a peep.
He loved music. He loved sound.
And singing.
And at the end, that he had a beautiful smile. And I remember once, it was probably that week, Judith put him in front of a mirror, and I thought he was very advanced, of course. And a genius and advanced, but he was probably only 10 weeks old. And she put him in front of the mirror, and he saw himself, and he was smiling, and he had this cute little dolphin laugh. And it was just so, I don't remember having a 2.5-month-old and having that laugh and those smiles yet. I know 6 weeks, my kids started to smile, but not like that.
So my mom's going to join. I would love for you to stay on, and you guys can meet briefly before we do our conversation.
Sure, why not? That'd be great.
Judith, do you have any other questions for your mom?
It's just so emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard. my other daughter said, "You're doing that? It's going to be so hard." And I went, "Yeah, but I got to do it." So, look, I made it to the whole end.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on.
I'm happy to do it.
What would you tell other lost moms, like if you met
To go with the flow, to just follow their lead, to not make any fuss over the laundry or the dishes. That was one thing I did right. Don't ask them to do anything. Don't expect them to do anything, but just let them not do anything.
Thank you for taking care of me.
It was my pleasure. It was my honor. It was my honor.
My mom's here.
Oh, good.
Hi.
Okay, I have a question for you before. I'm Marlene. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Did you think it was odd that they were going to a cabin in the woods together with never meeting each other?
Not only did I think it was odd, it was extremely out of character for Alina.
Oh.
And with all the crazy stuff going on the internet, I thought, oh, some guy's just going to be there and he's going to kill her.
Yeah. So,
and because she was very clear about how you won't be able to contact me. There's no internet. I'm like, okay. So first of all, you don't even like the woods, number one. Number two, you can go with a complete stranger who I've never met or seen and who probably doesn't exist. Okay. All right.
I tried to explain to Alina how in character it was. I was
for Judith, it was completely in character, 100%.
I was like, this isn't weird. We're just gonna go.
And when she told us Alina's story, I said, well, nobody could make that up.
So I'm going to share a little something right now that Alina doesn't know. So I was freaked out. And, she wasn't really doing great also. And I wasn't sure about her judgment. I have a close friend who has known Alina since she was 5 years old, my friend Diane. She's a really good sleuth. So I'm like, I looked up Judith's name. I got you to give me her first and last name. I looked her up. I couldn't really find anything online. I'm like, okay, this person doesn't even exist. So that's what really convinced me she didn't exist. Uh-huh. My friend Diane said, I found something after, hours of searching. I found something online about a loss of a child with that person's name in like a newsletter for a synagogue. I'm like, okay, so then that's clear.
Oh,
I'm real.
Hey, that was good sleuthing.
That was good sleuthing.
That was
You didn't see my excellent soccer scores?
No, I didn't. It was really crazy, but I was very sad to hear about your loss, by the way. But I just it was a huge relief.
I'm sure it was. I asked Judith's husband if he thought this was safe, and he said, sure. And I'm like, oh my God, you are clearly not in your right mind either.
Even Alina's brother, who's like as low key as they come. I said, don't you think that's a little odd? And he said, yeah, it's totally out of character for Alina. But of course, nobody would say anything to her but me. I always have to be the bad guy.
Right.
Well, I'm sure no one. You didn't know. I mean, who knew? I guess I could have been a stranger, but I kept telling Lena, I was like, I'm 5 feet. I was like, I'm 5 feet and 110 pounds. No, 120 pounds. I was like, I promise I couldn't do anything if I wanted to. I'm nothing. I'm useless and half incapable because I can't get my life in order.
But I'm sure seeing that announcement made a big difference. Yeah.
Well, I did because I thought that's a really long game to kill Alina to come up with that.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So I mean, I shouldn't make fun. I have a little bit of a dark sense of humor as well. So, but it was a big relief to know that Judith seemed to be a real person.
Very nice.
Well, thank you so much, Marlene, for joining us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And it was so nice to meet you and see you both.
Yeah. I know.
All right.
Bye, Mommy. Love you.
Right. Oh, I want to say also on the same theme is that I did look at all your pictures on Instagram, and he was a beautiful baby. He is a beautiful baby, that Quinn. He is. So and there's a cute one of the two of you looking at each other that's very, very special. Very special. It was really nice to see. Okay.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
So everybody who's listening, meet my mom, Alina's mom, Michele.
Hello. So nice to be here. Seeing Judith for the first time in person is nice, live and moving.
Alive and moving and
alive and moving.
Tears.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to start with, I want to hear from you. If you can just describe what I was like before the loss, like what was I like as a person? How was I as a child? Talk about me.
Alina was really a super easy kid. I mean, she was demanding, like intellectually demanding. In other words, she liked to talk. She asked a million questions. She kind of always was on until she went to bed. She was a good sleeper until 5 a.m. And then she was up and ready to go for the rest of the day. But we used to joke and say, well, we still joke and say she was like 3 going on 30. She was independent from the get-go, did not want help. Aunt Susie has a very sad, but we always laugh about how she tried to take her hand going up the steps when she was like 3 years old, and she said, "Aunt Susie, I don't need you." It was my sister's heart, because who doesn't want to be needed by a child? So she was always super independent, always prepared, always really almost always pretty cheerful. I think I maybe gave her a timeout. I don't know. I can say probably maybe 3 times in her whole childhood. A punishment for Alina would be like, I'm going to take away that, if you're not going to whatever, I'm going to need to take that book away, because she really loved to read. She was outgoing and friendly and, had a lot of friends and was kind of a caretaker to her friends in many respects. I'm definitely a caretaker to her brother. She's really spoiled her brother. And just was, just always self-reliant, resilient, and brave in so many ways. She was really well liked by parents and kids alike, and she was just a very likable, in many ways, just a very easy child to have.
Yes, I can see that. I can definitely see that, and I think it's interesting because I know we'll talk about it later, but I only know Alina after the loss, and it's like you can see shadows almost of that. I see like an echo of that, a different version of that exact same person that you're describing, with maybe like
with trauma.
A messy version of that.
So I will say, I don't think I have said this to you before, Alina, and maybe this is not the right time to say it, because maybe you're going to ask about this, but I like a couple of weeks after the baby died, right? Obviously it was just like awful and devastating for all of us. But Diane, my friend Diane, and my friend Josette, and my sisters, I remember sort of saying to them, okay, now I'm going to get tearful already. You know how Lena always had that bright light, and a sparkle and kind of an effervescence about her. I feel like that light is dimmed, and I think it's dimmed forever. Sorry. And my friends were like, and my sisters, no, it's not dimmed forever. She'll be okay. She's going to come back. And so that was really just hard, because it wasn't like she wasn't an amazing person still, but I just felt like, with all of the suffering, and of course the situation was just so crazy all around, that I just felt so devastated, because it just felt like such a loss of her as well. And not just in terms of, okay, she's suffering this loss and she's pulling away and she's needing to do certain things to take care of herself. That sort of was expected, but just that she might never really be able to find that light again was really hard to deal with as a mom.
Is it, so some of that I'm sure is you feeling the loss on my behalf, right? But I would love to hear if you can talk about, we talked about this with Judith's mom too, like my role in the family.
Yeah.
Like how did our dynamic change as a family after that?
It was one thing when we were all living together, right? That was a different sort of thing. When you went off to college, of course, there was a much more of a separation of, you weren't really involved in as many activities and around as much. And
right. And I moved out at 18 to go to college, and I would spend the summers at home. But really, by the time I graduated college, I was kind of like off.
Yeah, you
right?
never really came back to live. And so I think that there was, and that's a whole other thing that's not related to today at all, but when they leave home is like the dynamic completely changes, right? So, but then I think when you got pregnant, I felt a renewed sense of closeness. I think I would have described us as close and being able to talk about things. I mean, you were always kind of a private kid, like to solve your own problems. I mean, as much as that can distress me at times a lot because I feel like an outsider, I think you could get it from me. So I can't really fault you too much for that. Although I think you're a little bit more of an extreme in that respect than I am. But I do see that part of myself in you. And so that's challenging because there's nothing I can really do about it.
I will say also, like, I also felt like when I got pregnant and the excitement of the new baby and all of that, I also felt a renewed sense of closeness as well. Not even like it wasn't renewed so much as just a level that wasn't there before, because it's not like it had gone away and come back. It was like just an additional level that we couldn't have had before because I wasn't a mom before.
And can you share with me like a little bit about what Alina's like, if like, in the family, meaning, is the party starter? Is she, where would she be in terms of like how
I wouldn't say she was like ever kind of the party starter or the life of the party, but she was very much in terms of, and I'll just talk about extended family even, she was definitely a focal point of a lot of attention and energy, I think, because she was like a little dynamo in her own way, an introverted dynamo. And so, she always had a lot of things going on. She was always involved in a lot of different things. She definitely was high energy and pretty engaged person.
And I can remember on family vacations or at family get-togethers, like I would very much be present with everybody who was there.
Right. And rallying the troops.
The cousins might be, going and doing something else. They might be in a room by themselves, but I would always be out and about with everybody, having conversations with the grandparents, having conversations with the aunts, like always very much like in with whatever the mix of whatever was happening with the group. I was very much an active participant in all of that.
And Alina always was, always gravitated towards adults, I would say. I mean, or didn't have any hesitation to just hanging out with the adults. And they call my sisters and I the sisters, and she would do things with us and have fun, I think, for the most part. That's my impression anyway. So she was a little bit of a like an enthusiastic rallying, but when she had enough, she had enough. And that was hard for some of the more extroverted people in our family to manage.
Yeah. And so I know, Alina, do you want to start with where we started, which is the early days?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't want to necessarily, just for like my own mental health and yours probably, I don't need to talk about like the day he died. But if you could talk about like the early days or like the first month, like what was that like for you?
For me or in relation to you?
Both.
Yeah, it was, well, so I know that you've said, and I may have said this as well to you, but I know that you've said that, obviously the day of Quinn's death was the worst day of your life and you've survived it, right? And so I think it's sort of a different, I mean, it's an experience I wouldn't have anticipated. Well, obviously the death I wouldn't have anticipated, but even in thinking about it from an intellectual standpoint, it was the worst day of my life as well. And that doesn't often happen, right? With people and I'd say it was absolutely the worst day of Neil's life and my, dad's life too. And I said to somebody recently, what started out last year is what felt like really my most joyful life. It was his birth. It was more joyful to me than the birth of my own children. And so quickly it turned to shit. I mean, that's what I tell people. It just was like, it turned to like the most joyful time to like the worst time of my life. And it was a really hard year. Those first couple of months in a way were almost less hard than as the year progressed. Because there's a sense of numbness. There's a sense of like activity, right? You're sort of focusing on like trying to get Alina and Kaylee meals and trying to, Bill also needed a lot of support.
Bill is my dad.
Sorry. And I mean, not surprisingly. And I feel like I have a lot of people that I really can count on for support, who I can call and talk to. I have really close friends and my sisters. And so I think I always feel like he didn't have the same level. So I feel like I was his main support person. And that was very hard and challenging because I was not doing great. And we had all these other transitions going on at the same time. We had moved up here and, we'd had a lot of losses.
Yeah, actually, I don't know that I've talked about that much on the podcast. But so for anyone who probably, I guess they don't know this, but so my parents lived in New Jersey. That's where I grew up. And 10 days before Quinn died, my parents moved to Massachusetts, with, the assumption being, the intention being that they would be able to be more active grandparents, be more of a help to me as a new mom, and especially with COVID. And I didn't, necessarily want to put Quinn in daycare. You were going to be taking care of him for some of the hours of the week. And so 10 days before he died, you moved up here. So the timing
And I was by myself. Dad was not up here yet. So
Yeah.
he had gone back because we still had stuff there, and he wasn't going to see the baby anyway, and you. So he had gone back to New Jersey with Neil. And so I was up here on my own. And so, yeah, it was awful. But I mean, I had also a very supportive workplace. I was working remotely up here, but in New Jersey, and I was really afforded as much time as I needed. And so that was really nice and helpful. But I think the hardest part, well, I mean, no, it's not the hardest part. The hardest part was the loss, but is not really knowing how to help other than like bringing food, because you didn't really seem like you wanted company or support. And when I say company, it's not like I thought we were going to have a social get together, but you wanted to just kind of tuck away and isolate. And that was really, really hard, because I just felt like, and I would say, like, when my sisters would say, well, how's she doing? And I'd be like, well, I haven't seen her. All I needed to do was sort of like set eyes on you. And then I'd be like, okay, she's okay. So I would bring coffee over, honeydew, and a donut to Kaylee and Alina, just because I felt like I needed to see their faces, even if it was for 5 minutes, because when you don't have that context, it was easy. And also what you're hearing is sort of the worst of everything. It's really hard to think and I know you didn't feel like you were functioning, but like that you were upright.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a concern about your safety. I really didn't. But I did have a concern that you could just fade away, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting because Judith is an extreme extrovert, I would say. I would classify you as an extreme.
I would say less so now than I was before, but I would say definitely I'm an extreme extrovert. Yeah.
The difference between how we both responded in the immediate aftermath of the loss, you very much wanted to be crying with other people, and I very much wanted to be crying by myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also moved into my parents. Like, talk about opposite extremes. I moved in. My mom, she just spoke, and she spoke about how I would crawl into their bed at 2 a.m. and talk about. I think that this is just a good example of how people react so differently. You wanted to make sure, and my mom probably wanted me out of her bed.
So she was ready to kick you out of the nest at a certain point.
No, I think that she was, I don't know. I mean, I think that she probably wanted sleep. I don't know. But I guess it's good to hear how different people respond, because there's no right, there's no wrong. We're just completely different people.
Right.
So I think that's really interesting.
And I think also it was frustrating. I mean, I wasn't mad, obviously, but it was frustrating and upsetting because I felt like, does Alina not know that I just want to be there, that we don't need to talk. I mean, I am a talker, but I'm also like, I can sit for hours with somebody and say nothing and feel perfectly comfortable with that. And I thought, for me, a presence of somebody can be comforting as long as they're not smothering me or talking. Sometimes other people have the tendency to talk too much. I just need to be quiet and in my own head, but I feel like I could do that. And I would say, we could just watch a movie together. And she'd say, no, that's okay. I'm fine. I'm just going to be on my own. It was hard because I had no idea really how to help her.
What was, from your perspective, like, do you even remember your mom wanting to come over? And do you remember, and what was your thought process when she'd be like, I want to come and watch a movie with you?
Mommy, I don't need you.
I don't need you. Even to this day, I do tend to withdraw. I think it doesn't really feel, I remember saying, I don't know, to you, Judith, I remember saying to, my friends, other friends in the early days, like, I can tell my mom just wants to be there while I'm sad. Like, I felt like you wanted, it wasn't even that you wanted to see me sad. It was that you knew I was sad and you just wanted to be there. But I didn't want to be with anyone. There was no part of me that when I was in those really bad states, like really bad days, really bad moods, really bad state, there was no part of me that felt lonely and like it would have been easier if someone else was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I had to listen to that because I couldn't, I knew for your sake it would have been helpful for you to be around me, but I couldn't do it for you.
Mm-hmm. I kept sort of trying to open the door to some conversation and checking in. And you were like, no. I don't ever want to feel like I'm on the sidelines of your life. And I want to add one other thing when you asked about Alina as a child. I mean, she was always independent and didn't really express a lot of feeling and emotional stuff. I mean, you did always kind of want to deal with stuff, so it is kind of your personality built in.
And what about, how would you say, well, because I feel like we also have to address the Kaylee thing because it was all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Did that add, how did that fit into everything going on from your perspective?
What I felt like was the timing was just horrific. Her whole world was disintegrating. Little did I realize that the universe had a whole fun other experience in store for us, her and Marlene, just to show me how wrong I was. But it just seems so complicated at such an already, I mean, when your baby is so young, it's such a stressful time generally, and you were just going back to work and
then Quinn died.
And then Quinn died. I was like, okay, well, there I go. Yeah. And in some ways, you sort of have that weird magical thinking that you do, which is nuts. Like, oh, did I bring this on? Because I was thinking, I think I said to people, this, loss of her whole life turned upside down was the worst thing that could have happened. And I just remember after the fact thinking, why did I even think that? Of course it wasn't the worst thing that happened. Kaylee's still a loving person. You guys were still going to have a relationship of a supportive relationship. I mean, it obviously brought a lot of perspective to all of that. And I remember some of my friends saying, I'm not sure how you're handling it so well. I said, hey, Alina is being incredibly gracious and kind given the circumstances. And I need to be at least as gracious and kind and accepting as she is.
You were following her lead.
I was trying whatever she would give me. No, I was trying, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. But so like, even in the beginning, when I first learned and Quinn was still there, I was like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make Alina comfortable and Kaylee comfortable, because like that was paramount for me, that they could be able to parent and not.
Yeah. And I do think
strained by that.
I think I tried really hard. I was very clear with you guys that like she was Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
You refer to her as Kaylee. These are her pronouns. Mm-hmm. We don't know what it means for a marriage. We're not calling her dad. And to your guys' credit, you did the very best you could. It wasn't always perfect, but you definitely listened when I was very clear about it. And you guys were very, you tried really hard.
We did. So. I mean, I hope that was received in that same way by Kaylee as well. It was just so unexpected.
Understatement of the world.
Yeah. And so I think it was very hard to just switch gears. I mean, obviously probably more challenging for Kaylee, and I was very appreciative of that. And I hated the idea that she was suffering. I knew that must have been a very, very difficult road and may continue to be, right? So I was very mindful of that. And I certainly didn't want to pile on to any distress she was already experiencing, but it was hard.
So I want to ask you, if you were talking to another mom of a lost mom, what advice would you have for them? Or what are some things that you've learned over the last year?
I mean, I don't know. It's a hard question. I'm not sure that I learned anything. I mean, I definitely would advise to follow the lead of the person. I have a background in grief and bereavement because I worked in hospice. So in some ways I had and not even an intellectual understanding. I mean, I had a lot of losses in my own life and have been through a lot of bad, sad deaths. And so it's not like this was like out of the blue. I mean, obviously the devastation of this particular thing was far outweighed anything else that had ever happened. But so I just tried to be there and tried to do what little I could. And it was hard to keep up the was hard to keep going in. And I've listened to you guys on the podcast when you say, just keep asking, or just keep bringing, or just keep at it. If it's not going to fit this day for a visit or for a coffee or for whatever, just keep doing. And at a certain point, it just felt like it was annoying you more than anything else. And so it was hard to know, like, you don't want to kind of leave you hanging there, but at the same time, you gave me messages, both verbally and physically, a physical barrier of a door that, like, so, I mean, I do think it's important to continue to do, and I think concrete things are really helpful.
I remember, I think I said to you at one point, like, I know you want to be there for the really emotional stuff. What I need you to do
is the concrete stuff.
Stuff, like unloading the dishwasher. How many times did you load and unload my dishwasher?
Yeah.
Hundreds of times. Yeah. Like literally for like 6 months, I don't think I touched a dish, right?
Yeah.
And you brought me coffee. You brought me and Kaylee coffee, as you mentioned, honeydew coffee and a donut.
Like Susie was vacuuming at your
3 or 4 times a week.
I think Neil even vacuumed at your house a couple times. Maybe you don't remember.
I mean, your friend's folding my laundry.
Yeah.
Like that was the stuff I really needed. And you really showed up for me in those ways. That was what I really, really, really needed. I felt like the grief work I feel like I've had to do a lot of that internally in my own head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really needed the concrete stuff, for sure.
And the concrete stuff, I mean, I do think that is really important. It's hard to take care of yourself after such a devastating loss. But it was hard to, and again, I'm not really much of I do talk a lot, like Alina talks a lot, but when I'm working through something difficult, I'm not really somebody who wants other people's feedback or telling me what to do. So you have that from me, and also, I think even more so, but I just wanted to be there, like just to be a presence and just to do something to like veg out with you, or like we watched that glass blowing show. That was really great. And then
how many times did we watch that glass blowing show? Like 5 times.
I know what you're talking about on Netflix.
Oh, it's like addictive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I mean, you guys know this, having a child, and Neil and I were just talking before, but he was saying, you were more worried about this than I was. Meanwhile, he was very worried about it. But I said, I think you don't understand that your child's happiness is great, but your child's sorrows, it's harder on a parent. It's hard to believe, but those are harder than certainly my own sorrows. Like my own sorrows, it doesn't matter. I'll just figure them out. But when your child is suffering, I mean, it's just, it's awful. I mean, it's just awful to observe and to be so helpless and not be able to, and know that there's literally nothing that you can do.
And how would you say Alina's changed since the death of Quinn?
Well, I mean, I know she says she's had anxiety her whole life, but I mean, she exuded bravery and self-confidence her whole life. And so I would say that got shaken. I mean, her whole core got shaken. Oh, sorry, Chuck. Her sense of self, I think, and self-identity took a hit. And I think you really, you lost the vision of yourself as a competent, capable, decisive person. Yeah. So even within anxiety, you can still be all of those things, right? But right. Alina would like go on a limb. She was not afraid of the dark. She didn't have like regular fears that kids have. She would go up and do like in musicals and do these song and dance numbers in front of audiences. And I was like, I could never do that. So in my mind, I just never thought of her as having that much anxiety. But she comes by it naturally. It's a fact.
Alina, when your mom was saying that, when she was saying about how you lost your sense of self a little bit and you're shaken, you know what I was thinking? I was like, that's my favorite part about her. She's a mess. I love it.
And so along those lines, let me say one other thing that I have often thought about both of my children is that, and not like I wanted them to have a lot of sorrow growing up. I certainly didn't want that, but I felt I was worried. I had come from a pretty difficult childhood, which shaped me in many ways. And I often worried, it wasn't like I wanted them to have worse times, but I worried sometimes that had they had difficult enough experiences growing up, that it would give them the tools that they needed if something bad happened, right? I just always worried about that. And I felt like, because I felt like there was nothing we could even go on. You can't really teach somebody that. It's something that you have to just kind of be exposed to certain things. And then you kind of realize, okay, here's what I do to get through this and that. And I had always worried about that. And then, of course, really the absolute worst thing happened. Wasn't expecting that. So that was just something I had kind of always worried about a little bit. And then,
I mean, what I'll say is I think I would agree with you. I feel like I had a fairly easy life up until this, which all happened at once. And I, having been to all of this therapy over the last year, I think the easy life was actually a gift and made it easier because I had the opportunity to, like, I don't have 10,000 traumas going on in my head that I have to deal with. I have this one, I mean, it's two big losses, but I have this period of time that is extremely traumatic, but the foundation of everything else is really solid. And I can still really rest on that, even with everything else that I have going on. So I think in a way that it has served me.
Well, you were set, you started off from a different point. You started off from a cleaner slate than if you were working through childhood traumas, and then you had a second one compounded on top of it.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't ever worry that she was not going to be okay. Alina, we moved to Europe when she was a kid. She didn't want to leave, and she got there and landed on her feet and was fine. She didn't want to come back to the United States. She got back first day. She was back with her friends, whatever. I just always viewed her as an incredibly resilient person. And I didn't really, honestly, I never doubted that she was going to be really fine eventually. But I knew it was going to take a long time before she felt fine. Yeah.
Is there anything that you've seen like a change for the better in me since the loss?
I think that, you're definitely more compassionate. I think you're more tolerant of other people's struggles. I think when you were younger in particular, there was a bit of a, come on, just buck up and get through it. Cause that did work for you. So I think that those are gifts, really. I mean, and really, honestly, when do you grow as a person? You don't grow under happy times. Those don't teach you how to do anything differently or improve your life in terms of your ability to be a whole person. It's the struggles that really, that's where you grow. Unfortunately, that's the truth of it. So, you were more of a get things done and muddle, get through it. And now I think you're willing to sort of take the time and be able to say, this is what I need, and I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to make myself a priority. And, I think those are good things.
So the two questions that I want to ask you at the end, the first is if you could share a memory of me as a mom to Quinn. And then the second would just be a memory of Quinn, your
videos of him talking to me, and he was really a regular little person, becoming a regular little person.
There was construction,
and he's got startled at one point. Yeah.
And you go, construction, and he's looking at you, go
him to just be it's okay. He is so sweet, so cute, and so active, just bouncing around. That I am I feel sad that Dad and Neil didn't have that experience. But I am so grateful that I had it, because it's a really good memory. And so for you as a mom, I think it was so gratifying to see. It's hard to explain what it's like to have your child have a child. Way more than I even imagined. I mean, I have never felt joy like that, of seeing you as a mom. And I loved how, I know that there were struggles. I know things weren't easy, obviously, in any case, with just the sleeping, the breastfeeding, all that stuff. But you seemed so joyful. And that was really special to be able to be part of that and see that.
I was really joyful.
Yeah. I mean, he was really something else. Yeah.
Any last questions, Judith, before we go?
It makes me sad that I didn't get to meet him.
Yeah. I mean, and my sister, there are people that are really important to us who didn't get to meet him. My sister Carol never got to meet him. I know that, Neil will say there's no good pictures of me with Quinn, because the one day we were taking pictures when I was up there, it's I was in sweatpants and I hadn't showered. And he said, he'll say, it never occurred to me that was it. like it just never occurred to me. And, you know, he was even saying the other day, he goes, I think I cried every day for all of last year at night when I would go to bed because he felt so sad for you and, you know, because of the baby. And,
For himself.
yeah.
Yeah. It really, I mean, it affects the whole family. It's just so tragic.
You know, the whole family, everybody is really, you know, has really struggled a lot at various times. So
Yeah.
it's been hard.
Well, thank you for all of the support, the practical support, and the little bits, the emotional support that I've let you give me. I knew if I needed you, you'd be there in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and that's what my friends kept saying. You gave her everything she needed, Michele. Like you and Bill gave her everything she needed. She's fine. I mean, she'll be fine because you gave her what she needed. So I don't know.
Do you feel like the podcast has been helpful? Like I know for my family, like they have a window into my brain
Yes.
now that they didn't have.
Well, first of all, I think the podcast has been very helpful. It seems like, Judith, I don't really know you well, but it seems like it's been super helpful for the healing for both of you. So that's also,
Yes.
I like that. It makes me feel really good. I will say, this part you're going to probably edit out. It felt very, very difficult to get my information about how things were for you in a public forum. You know, I think when you first, Judith, you probably had a different experience with your parents, but Alina gave me a very strict guideline. I'm going to share this with you. I mean, and she didn't do it right away, right? I'm going to share this with you. I don't want to talk about it. So like I knew if I heard something on there, I couldn't ask, I couldn't say, I couldn't follow up. That was really hard to feel like I was one of the many listeners. So that, you know, so I think it was a blessing. Personally, I think it was a blessing for you guys. I am so glad you guys found each other. I mean, very amazing kismet.
We both feel very lucky to have one another.
I think that's been amazing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, the lost mom world is a hot mess. Not everyone's a good fit.
No, I know.
You don't know what you're getting out there.
I think it's so interesting that you guys are obviously, and it's very clear on, you know, I haven't met you before, but it's very clear on the podcast how different you guys are and how wonderfully close and supportive you are of one another. It's really nice to see. And helpful, you know, as a parent to sort of feel like, okay, so she's
Somebody's got it.
Yeah.
Got her.
At one point, Judith, I wanted to ask Alina for your phone number because I thought, well, if Alina just at some point isn't doing great and she's refusing to let me in, I'm going to just text Judith and say, can you check in on her? Because she seems really not well. Yeah. And I'm happy to talk to you whenever you want. If I asked her, she'd be like, no, I am not giving you Judith's number. You do not need to be talking to Judith about me. So
you can have Judith's number. You can call her anytime.
My in-laws do the same. My husband's like Alina, very much like Alina, and they never know what's going on ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they call me, but really only to know how he is.
I don't think that's really true. But that they're only
no, I don't know. No, I don't know. But anyway, it was such a pleasure meeting. Mommy, I can't see your screen.
Failed to start video. Wait, that's probably me. Okay, wait. What do you mean cannot start video? Oh, come on.
Judith,
I think there's something wrong with your video, but don't worry about it now. Just log on your phone.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to get my charger. I just realized that my phone might not last. Hi.
Mom,
I'm loud.
Can you be further away from your microphone?
Is that what? I mean, I'm not that close to it. I'm like 18 inches away. Is there a way for me to turn it down? How about if I talk really quietly like this? I'm a little bit of an animated Italian person. I'm not going to be able to talk quietly. Why is it so loud?
You can hop off, but just keep your browser open for the
Wait,
audio
don't do
to upload,
anything.
okay?
Just wait. She can't even hear you. She's gonna log off. Wait, no, don't leave. Okay.
No.
Can you text her and just tell her to leave the browser open?
Oh my God, my phone is dead. Hold on. Alina, can you call her? Your phone is alive.
Yeah.
Just say keep everything
Alina.
So just say keep everything open. Don't close your computer.
Everything open. Browser open to upload the audio. Mom, is there any way you can be way further away?